Welcome. So, today we're diving into the invisible, kind of hidden cultural forces that literally decide whether a nation's democracy survives or crumbles. Have you ever wondered why some countries adopt a constitution and just thrive, while others with the exact same institutions are constantly stuck in uncertainty? Well, the answer usually isn't found in a law book, it's actually hidden deep within the foundation of the society itself. So let's unpack this whole concept.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Defining political culture. 2. Three types of culture. 3. Pakistan's democratic trajectory. 4. Elite control and patronage. 5. Civil-military relations. And finally, 6. The way forward. We'll start with some global political science theories and then apply them objectively to Pakistan's history.
Section 1. Defining political culture. Let's look at what's really going on beneath the surface of all those elections and parliaments.
Why do some democracies fail? It's a massive question, right? You could literally copy-paste a successful country's constitution word for word, build a fancy parliament, hold elections, and the democracy could still fail. But why? Because the real answer lies in what we can't see. Think of institutions as just the hardware. Political culture is the software that actually runs the entire system.
So how do we actually define it? Well, according to political scientists like Gabriel Allman and Lucian Pye, political culture is basically a set of shared views, beliefs, and normative judgments that a society holds about its political system's legitimacy. The key takeaway here, it's about the entire system. It's not about whether you like a specific politician or a certain policy, it's about whether people view the system itself as legitimate, how power should be used, and how everyday citizens relate to that power.
Moving to Section 2, Three Types of Culture. Let's check out the academic framework that explains how citizens interact with their state.
Okay, so Almond and Verba broke political culture down into three ideal types. First up is the parochial culture. In this setup, citizens have very little connection to the state. Their focus is almost entirely on their family, tribe, or local community. Then we have the subject culture. Here, people are aware of a centralized authority, but their relationship with it is super detached and passive. They obey the laws, sure, but they don't really participate. And finally, there's the participant culture. This is where citizens are highly active, mobilized, and fully expect to help shape political decisions.
If we look at this in the real world, the difference is huge. In a subject culture, a citizen feels like, hey, the law is just something I obey, not something I help shape. But in a participant culture, the citizen obeys the law, but also actively takes part in making those decisions. This distinction is absolutely crucial. A stable democracy practically requires a participant culture, where people feel their voices are actually reflected in the laws they live under.
All right, Section 3, Pakistan's democratic trajectory. Now let's apply these academic concepts directly to Pakistan's historical and structural context.
Our explainer today draws on some fascinating research from the Pakistan Social Sciences Review, specifically a paper looking at the political culture of Pakistan and democratic stability. The researchers took a really close, objective look at the deep connection between Pakistan's complex culture and its fragile democracy. Basically, they argue that until we understand these cultural norms, we just can't fix the weaknesses in the system.
If we trace the timeline back to independence in 1947, researchers point to one major turning point, the dissolution of the Constituent Assembly in 1954. According to the study, this event set a historical precedent for centralization and authoritarian tactics, basically undermining the parliament's importance right out of the gate. After that, we see this long cycle, a constant push and pull between civilian rule and centralized military powers.
And this brings us to a really fascinating concept, conditional democracy. Researchers argue that over time, the political culture shifted so much that elites, and even a large chunk of the public, started supporting democracy only when the outcomes favored them. Like, if the result benefits me, democracy is great. But if it goes against my interests, well, suddenly they're willing to ignore the democratic mandate. And this kind of conditional, fair-weather support really prevents a democracy from ever solidifying.
Which brings us to Section 4, Elite Control and Patronage. Let's dive into the internal cultural challenges that are weakening these democratic institutions.
The research highlights some deeply rooted cultural realities where personal interests often override national ones. First off, power in Pakistan has historically been incredibly hierarchical and centralized. On top of that, political parties have very weak internal democracy. It's less about policy and much more about dynastic politics and personality-based leadership. And running the whole show, vast patronage networks controlled by landlords and elites. I mean, when loyalty is basically bought through patronage, genuine democratic accountability kind of goes out the window, doesn't it?
Section 5. Civil-military relations. Let's look at another crucial factor that defines the historical power dynamics in Pakistan.
Looking impartially at the researchers' findings, civil-military relations have left a massive imprint on the political culture. Historically, strong military interventions and the heavy influence of unelected institutions have weakened civilian governments. This concentration of power in just a few hands has consistently undermined the parliament and disrupted democratic continuity. It creates a culture where elected representatives can't properly govern simply because they're constantly worried about their power being stripped away.
And here is the core issue. Democracy is not merely associated with elections. We often fall into this trap, right? Thinking that just because people cast a vote, democracy is saved. But researchers stress that simply holding elections absolutely cannot make up for a lack of the rule of law, political tolerance, or structural accountability. Elections are just the starting line. They're definitely not the finish line.
Section 6, the way forward. Let's see what actionable solutions the research actually proposes.
Despite all these historical roadblocks, there is absolutely hope. Researchers maintain that democratic stability is entirely possible. But, and this is a big but, it requires a real transformation of the political culture. And we're actually seeing signs of this. Civil society is getting more active, independent media scrutiny is growing, and today's youth are way more politically aware and demanding accountability. We're slowly but surely watching a shift from a subject culture to a participant culture.
To accelerate this shift, the paper outlines a step-by-step strategy. Step 1, heavily invest in civic education and digital literacy so citizens can participate constructively. Step 2, independent media scrutiny. The media needs to be free and powerful enough to hold governments accountable without facing pressure. And Step 3, long-term structural reforms. We're talking about constitutional changes that ensure genuine, lasting checks and balances.
Ultimately, political leaders and society as a whole need to adopt some core democratic values. We need strict, impartial accountability where the law applies equally to everyone, no exceptions. We need social and political tolerance so a diverse society can function without tearing itself apart. We also need meaningful, long-term public participation that looks beyond quick, short-term gains. And crucially, we have to tear down the financial and social barriers that block young people and women from participating in the democratic process.
So I'll leave you with this one thought. Must cultural transformation precede true institutional reform? It's a real chicken and egg debate. Do we change the laws first and just hope the people follow them? Or do the hearts, minds, and the very political culture of the people need to change before laws and institutions can actually work? Definitely something to chew on next time you're looking at your local political landscape. Thanks for joining this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next one.